Welcome to the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. I am your host, Troy Renck, columnist for the Denver Post. Hope you're having a wonderful week. We're already into Thursday. Hope your homes are safe. We've had this crazy summertime hailstorm, rainstorms. You got to be careful out there. I just got a new slash certified used car vehicle, so I have been dodging hail the last few days, trying like crazy not to get damaged. But stay safe out there. Folks, we've entered that weird vortex of no Broncos camp. The draft was last night for the NBA, but the Nuggets didn't have any picks, did not move up to get into the first round, nor do I think they should have. We had the locals connection with Nick Clifford being drafted via trade from Oklahoma City to Sacramento. So that was cool, but we still got Broncos news, baby. It's not that far away from camp. We're essentially about 3.5 weeks away. The dates have been released. If you go on the Broncos website, on those open dates, and that's the good news. The bad news is all the tickets were gobbled up in, I think, 10 minutes. There's only allowing a capacity of 800 people for these public viewing sessions because of the construction of the new team headquarters out at Dove Valley. So keep an eye on the tickets being returned. I think people can get up to like 4 tickets, so they don't always use them on a random, Wednesday in August. Someone can't get off work, so it stinks if you didn't get tickets, but if don't completely rule it out. Keep an eye that they end up back in the queue where you can maybe sneak your family over there. I tell people all the time, always a great time, especially for kids. Not just the autographs, but you meet the players at the end of practice. You get a picture with them, create some memories. Training camp is much more suited for an interaction like that than anything really at the stadium, unfortunately. So hopefully you got tickets. If you don't, keep an eye on that queue. Maybe some will open up as we get closer or into training camp. But we got some topics to discuss today. Pro Football Focus came out with some interesting rankings of coaches. The AFC West quarterbacks, where should we consider those players in the pantheon of the current NFL? And what about this division? What about this division? These are topics, frankly, as a Broncos podcaster, I would not really want to address in past years. Because the Broncos coaches, quarterbacks, and their spot in the division was not great. Everything has changed. You can feel it. That gravitational pull of success. Can it continue? What is the coach's role as that? What is the quarterback's role? Where will they finish? We're going to get to all of that after the break. Have you been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work? What are you waiting for? Give my friends at Hoggatt Injury Law a call. You see Darby Hoggatt there on the screen. Their motto and Darby's motto with us, it's personal. I've known Darby for a long time. We traveled around watching our kids play baseball. I coached his son Jet in hoops and baseball. Great kid. Loved talking sports with Darby. We became good friends. Many of his clients become his good friends. You don't even have to pay Darby up front. If your case goes as planned, Darby will be the one writing checks to you. So again, if you've been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work, give Darby's team a call. It's 1-833-HOGGATT. The number right there on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, 1-833-464-4288, or go to the website at hoggattlaw.com. Welcome back to the Broncos Pod. I am your host, Troy Renck from the Denver Post. Thank you, Broncos country, from wherever you are joining me. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your support. The numbers, especially on YouTube, continue to grow. That's a credit to Nate Lundy at Mile High Sports that provides the platform, and, of course, Danny Bailey, who's behind the screen there. He does a great job getting these things out, the clips for me, the fingernail thing that I need, the sketch thing to tweet out that looks fantastic. So thank you specifically to Danny Bailey and Nate Lundy for that help, because I could not do this without them. They've made it a wonderful transition. You can still get me on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, but the transition to YouTube has helped grow the audience, and that is obviously a credit to you, Broncos country. And this is a good time to be a Broncos fan. The team was wandering in the darkness for 7-8 years there. Essentially, the moment Peyton Manning retired, everything changed. Everything changed. And they were non-competitive for about 6 of those 7 years. Sean Payton inherits the team in 2023. They start 1-5. and finish 8-9. They weren't going to get to the playoffs that year, although they had a slim chance at the end, and that loss to the Patriots, that unthinkable loss at home to the Patriots, buried that chance. Finish 8-9. Last year 10-7. But if you look since the 1-5 start, you're talking about then 8-4, 10-7, so 18-11 over the last 29 games. This is a franchise clearly trending upward. They've got an alignment with the owner, the GM, the coach, and the quarterback. But specifically with Sean Payton, they made him the highest paid coach when they brought him in. He's somewhere around 15, 18 million, depending on the figures. Coaches' salaries are not public, so we don't have the exact numbers, but he got paid an absolute boatload to come out of retirement. He was lured out of retirement because, in large fact, because of the fact of the Walton Penner ownership group and the tradition of winning in Denver. He didn't want to just go to random franchise and try to rescue it. And when he got here, he inherited an absolute mess from Nathaniel Hackett. Now, Hackett, if he's not the worst coach in Broncos history, he and Josh McDaniels are in a foot race to the very end, a photo finish, as to who is the worst coach in Broncos history. He inherited a mess. He inherited the Russell Wilson contract. It's very clear in hindsight he would have never agreed to the trade for Russell Wilson, and he certainly would not have agreed to the contract for Russell Wilson. And we'll talk about that contract briefly. I'm not going to bog down the pod with that because it is a lot of old history, but there's some interesting elements that just came out through reporting by Pablo Torre, and you can see that article summed up nicely by Parker Gabriel in the Denver Post. But Sean Payton takes over, and they go 8-9, 10-7. They end their playoff drought. They hadn't been to the playoffs since 2015. They end their drought without a winning record. Hadn't had that since 2016. And now, what's next? And when I asked Payton about this a few weeks ago, I framed the question with, you didn't come here to turn it around. You came here to win championships. And he said, absolutely, that's correct. So where are they now? Well, if you believe in Pro Football Focus's rankings, they're in a really good spot. Now, Pro Football Focus, again, it's a source of consternation for a lot of people, including players in the game, on how they grade them. It was created as independent analysts to watch every play of every game, to grade out players and try to establish almost like a WAR rating they do in baseball, which is wins above replacement. But the reality is that when you talk about football, it's a team sport. Baseball in so many ways is a solo concert with a solo performance within a concert. Much easier to evaluate and assign value in baseball, because football, you don't know the assignments on plays. That is part of the issue. You don't know the assignment. And because of that, it creates an issue of, did that guy miss the block, or was he responsible for the blitz? Or so anyway, but it's a little different with coaches. You're assigning value on coaches based on record, based on offensive, defensive rankings, this coaching staff, all that stuff. It's a little easier than assigning it to a player when you don't know the play that was called or audible and all that. That's it. Pro Football Focus has established their latest rankings of coaches. PFF, and you can find this on their website, ranks coaches accordingly. Their top 10. Number 1, Andy Reid. Number 2, Sean Payton. Thus the headline, Sean Payton second best. It was actually meant as a compliment, but it's a tease, as they say in the business. Sean McVay of the Rams 3rd. John Harbaugh of the Ravens 4th. Mike Tomlin of the Steelers 5th. Chargers, Jim Harbaugh 6th. Kyle Shanahan 7th. Nick Sirianni 8th of the Eagles, the world champion Eagles. Dan Campbell, the Lions 9. And Kevin Stefanski of the Browns rounds out the top 10. A common denominator of, what do we got? 6 of those, they've won a Super Bowl. That would include Andy Reid, multiple Super Bowls. Sean Payton has won 1. McVay's won 1. John Harbaugh has won 1. Mike Tomlin has. And Nick Sirianni obviously won this past February. But second, folks, for Sean Payton. And, it's an interesting thing is because oftentimes Payton shows up on the overrated coaching polls because many people believe he should have won at least one more Super Bowl with Drew Brees and New Orleans. I think if the year they lost to the Rams, they might have beaten the Patriots that year. He certainly, with his roster, maybe even a private moment, he would tell you should have won a second one. If he wins one with the Broncos, he's a Hall of Fame coach. I was just debating these Hall of Fame merits with Eric Goodman. You can see on his hot takes on Eric Goodman's Twitter, if you go to his name, Eric Goodman. We were debating at the end of that program about the Hall of Fame credentials of Mike Shanahan and Mike Holmgren. He made a compelling case for Mike Holmgren where I'm like, Mike Shanahan should be in 2 Super Bowls, greatest team in the league for 3 years, one of the greatest AFC teams ever statistically over a 3-year span, record-wise, road record, all that. But he's not it. But in Payton's case, he can do something no one's ever done, and that is he will become the first person to win a Super Bowl with an AFC team and an NFC team. That is something, folks. And trust me when I know he's very, very aware of his legacy in that regard and what this could mean here. And so when you see that number 2 ranking, I think that's fair because of the fact when you look at it, you're talking about a coach who has delivered consistently one of the best offenses over the course of almost 20 years. This will be his 18th year as a head coach. That matters. Real quickly, if you're listening, because I do some of the Rockies, I want to give you some breaking news on this. The Rockies made some change finally. It's internal, which of course is what they do. Walker Monfort, the oldest son of team owner Dick Monfort, has been promoted to executive vice president. Team president and CEO Greg Fiesel will retire. Thank God. Fiesel is terrible. And now the next move needs to be to retire and or fire Bill Schmidt, the general manager, bring in a president of baseball operations from outside, bring in a GM from the outside, hire 10 to 15 new coaches and scouts, and Dick Monfort has to step aside as well. That's the breaking news. You can find all that at the Denver Post with, you can find that with, Patrick Saunders, or just go to thedenverpost.com. So anyway, Sean Payton, let's get back to our topic on hand. Second best coach. What do you think of all that, folks? I mean, I think it was a little high based on his performance. The first year with the Broncos, his first 6 games, it was shaky. He was rusty. But when I look at that list and how he creates a culture, how he's turned the team around, how he has succeeded, it's only 1 year, in identifying, as he said, he would be better at it than most, identifying a franchise quarterback, drafting and develop one. That's, to me, is what kicks him up in these rankings. If he was using a vagabond veteran quarterback and they were 10-7 last year, it would be hard to articulate that what has he really done that's different. Well, now he's done something he's never done in his career. Identified, drafted a quarterback, and made it work. But Bo Nix, folks, as you know, you listen to this pod, 34 touchdowns last year. Tied for the team high in rushing touchdowns, caught a touchdown, threw for 29. So, I mean, that is something. That is something. And I think even if he doesn't match those statistics, he's going to get better because he's so comfortable in his skin. But Sean Payton deserves credit for that. Davis Webb, quarterback's coach, Joe Lombardi, the offensive coordinator, they're all part of this. Sean Payton drafted Bo Nix. And he turned him into, after that first month of the season, he statistically was a top 10 quarterback over the last, in regular season games, right around the last 13 games. So that figures into these rankings. Andy Reid it's funny, if you would have had this list before he landed in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes, specifically before Mahomes, he'd always be around top 5. Andy Reid could get you to a conference championship with the Eagles. He could get you there and win playoffs game with the Chiefs, could never get over the hump. He gets married to Patrick Mahomes, who he identified, deserves all credit. Sean Payton will tell you he was going to take him if Andy Reid didn't, but that didn't happen. And because if it did, Sean Payton would not be here. He would be in New Orleans, clearly, with Patrick Mahomes. But Andy Reid deserves all the flowers. He's going to go down as a top 3 coach in the NFL. If he wins a couple more Super Bowls, he's going to be in that argument for greatest ever, where that small list of Bill Belichick and Vince Lombardi. I mean, Andy Reid is certainly carving out that type of legacy at the end of his career here. He's won, and he deserves to be because of the work he's done specifically with Mahomes. But Sean Payton at 2. That is a credit to an offense last year that was 25 points a game. If you take out the defensive scores, right around 23.5 points a game. It's a credit to his ability to inherit an absolute tire fire, break out the extinguisher, change Sesame Street to Compete Street, get guys to buy in, get guys to stay healthy, get guys to be on the field for practice, and get guys to understand that the standard is winning, not competing. You have to have competitive spirit and have to, really get after it, because he practices guys hard. But he established this idea, like, we want to be on primetime games. We want to be in the big moments. We want the old throw down the sawdust, we'll play you anytime, anywhere. That is who Sean Payton is as a coach. Is starting to create that identity with his team. As they get better, we're seeing more of Sean Payton's personality come out, that arrogance and that antagonist and that agitator that he was during the height of his powers in New Orleans. But the idea of creating a culture, because it's organic in some ways, but it has to start at the top. If you want the people underneath to do it, your soldiers, if you will, your players, they have to see the leadership. It has to be demonstrated every day. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that with Sean Payton. In the creative friction, the disagreeing, the coaching, the making sure to push buttons with coaches and not coach them hard as much as have high expectations for them. And that creates the high expectations for players. And it's a work environment where if you walk in, and he wants an answer, it better not be, well, that's how we've always done it. They want to challenge people from Greg Penner on down, challenge people to see things differently, to do things differently. How can this be better? Sean Payton does a lot of that. So as much as he's got this old school Bill Parcells feel to him, there's part of him too that embraces analytics, embraces that newer side of sports of, looking for an edge that way and keeping guys healthy, understanding how much they're exerting themselves at practice, how much they're exerting themselves in the weight room, what that film study looks like. Is there a way to make it more productive? So second seems a little high, but when I look at this list, who's going to be above it? I mean, I'm surprised Sean McVay's not, based on what he's done with some of the talent around him. But again, he's had Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff, and Goff, he moved on from. Goff's become one of the top quarterbacks in the NFC, but he has a quarterback who's a Hall of Famer. He has a quarterback that's a Hall of Famer in Matt Stafford. You could argue for me he could be too. And it's funny because those two are good friends, even though the large age differential. But Sean Payton and Sean McVay are very close friends, get along well. And I could see why. I mean, just energy, enthusiasm, passion for the game, a lot of common traits. But when we go down this list, John Harbaugh, I actually think Jim Harbaugh is a better coach than John Harbaugh, but John Harbaugh has done it at the NFL level longer than Jim, and he's won a Super Bowl. That's what gives him the edge. But if you're asking me if the Broncos hadn't hired Payton, who would have been the best fit, it was clearly Jim Harbaugh, because they needed a culture changer, a guy who clearly this defining personality. That's what he is, and Jim is even more of that than John. They have similar traits. Obviously, Jim's quirky as hell, does things that are weird. And you do wonder, as he evolves in his second act in the NFL, are they going to pass more? Are they, because last year, Herbert had 23 touchdowns and 3 picks. I'm not sure you can win a championship that way in the NFL unless you just have a nasty defense. And the Chargers defense is good, not great that way. They're not historically great. But John Harbaugh being fourth. Mike Tomlin's a great coach. The overall body of work, he had the disadvantage of some of his best teams having to go through the Patriots, and Bill Belichick absolutely outclassed him every time he coached against him in the playoffs. And Tomlin has had a long playoff drought in terms of winning playoff games. He's always going to get you a winning season. You always know where you stand. The standard's the standard with Mike Tomlin. And now he's in that vortex that the Broncos were in. He doesn't have that franchise quarterback since Ben Roethlisberger retired. Maybe Aaron Rodgers gets them back over to the hump where they can win a playoff game. I think they're probably in the wrong division and certainly the wrong conference to do that. And I do wonder with Tomlin, is Aaron Rodgers first season with the Steelers, Tomlin's last season with the Steelers. Because if he has a losing record with Aaron Rodgers, and I don't think they will, but who knows? I mean, I could see him being 8-9. Then would Tomlin move on? The Steelers just don't fire coaches, but would he look for a new challenge? Because he would be coveted both in the broadcast booth and certainly as a coach. But we go down again. Jim Harbaugh is on that list. Kyle Shanahan, the only thing missing from his resume is frankly a Super Bowl. And unfortunately for him, he's coached some of his worst quarters in the Super Bowl. But when it comes to the run game, offensive design, Kyle Shanahan's always going to rank at the top of a coaching list. Nick Sirianni, I've warmed up to this guy. He's not for everyone. He's a little bit too passionate and coach friendly, and like he thinks he's playing at times, and getting into with the fans and stuff is a little much, but it works there. His players feed off him, his personality, and you can act like that when you're winning. They believe in him. If you just come into a random team and act like that, it typically doesn't work. But the reality is it works for that Philly group. It works in Philadelphia. It plays well in the room, if you will. And so Sirianni's on that list. Dan Campbell, again, high energy guy. He is someone who was part of the Sean Payton coaching tree. I love Dan Campbell and the energy he brings and the belief he creates and instills in his players. Dan Campbell, to move up on this list, has to become a better game day coach. I think we all agree that he screwed up in the NFC Championship game a couple years ago, not kicking field goals. Their identity of like going for it on every fourth down, there needs to be a little more nuance. And now they've lost some players. They've lost Ben Johnson. Can Dan Campbell be a better game day coach with perhaps more responsibility on his shoulders now? Kevin Stefanski, it's an interesting one because I think the Browns are going to be terrible. They have no quarterback, even though they have 5. You're talking about Flackett, Pickett, Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, and obviously Deshaun Watson's not playing and hurt. Stefanski, I don't know that he survives after this year. I think, but as a run game coordinator and an offensive coordinator, I understand the praise for him. But what do you all think? Let me know. Tweet at me at Troy Renck on Twitter or Facebook. I've been replying more on there as well. Those are 2 places you can reach me at my first and last name. But Sean Payton being second's got to mean something to you, folks. It's got to mean you're in a good place with the Broncos. Now, can he get him over the hump? He's got him relevant. He's got him competitive. Now comes the hard part, staying there with a target on your back. The ability to win a division. The ability to win a playoff game. Can Sean Payton do that? Because that's what hurt him at the end of his Saints career, was the fact that they did not meet expectation in the playoffs. That is the next step here. Because if he does meet expectation in the playoffs of the Broncos over the next 2-3 years, and one of those years ends up with a Super Bowl victory, he's a Hall of Famer. For me. Now, I'm not saying first guy, all that stuff, but he's a Hall of Famer despite Bountygate. He'd be a Hall of Famer. Why? Well, again, this goes back to the drafting of Bo Nix. And you see the headline there, AFC West quarterbacks. For how long, folks, did we not want to have this conversation? Because I always would tell people when there's like, the Broncos are going to be better. I'm like, how can they be better when they have the worst quarterback in the AFC West? And that was when it was Mahomes and Derek Carr and Justin Herbert. Or even Alex Smith before Mahomes. Broncos always had the worst quarterback after Peyton Manning in the division. It's hard to be a playoff team when you have the worst quarterback in your own division. That's no longer the case. I would say, now again, you're going to get argument on this fact, but clearly Mahomes is one in the division. That's a non-discussion. He's going to end up as an all-time great. He's certainly already on that path. No argument. Bo Nix, Herbert, and Smith, not a lot of separation there. If you tell me at the end of this season that Bo Nix is clearly the second best quarterback, I would believe it. I mean, the Broncos' plan at quarterback for years was A, B, C, D, E, F, U. And you, the fans, were getting the middle finger watching those teams play offensively because they were so terrible. Nothing worse than being bad and boring. That's not the case anymore. As Bo Nix grew into the offense, and as we saw his athleticism, we saw his accuracy, it's not his finished product, but we can't know his ceiling until we see what J.K. Dobbins can do in the run game, R.J. Harvey, and certainly Evan Ingram. We don't know what the ceiling is yet. But Rank those AFC West quarterbacks for me, folks. Send me a tweet about it. Reach out on Facebook. When I post the pod there, where do you think the quarterbacks rank? Because I think at the end of this year, we're going to say Mahomes 1, Nix 2, Herbert 3, Geno Smith 4. If it's somehow a different order and it's Herbert 2, Smith 3, Nix 4, the Broncos are not winning 11, 12 games. They're going to win 8 or 9. Nix needs to be in the argument. Maybe it's a close argument with Herbert. I think Geno Smith is on the other side. I think he's a functional NFL quarterback, but I don't see him as better than Nix at this point in his career. 2 years ago, yes, 100%. Not this year, not this season, not with that Raiders offense. But again, Geno's done it, so he deserves some respect. Nix to me is better. Herbert's the wild card. He is valued nationally in a way that's just hilarious to me at times. And I know why, because I've stood next to him on a sideline in the field before a game. The guy is the prototype out of Central Casting quarterback. 6'5", 245, absolute cannon for an arm, physical, bright. Doesn't have an outgoing personality per se, but very understanding of what he's trying to accomplish. It's just he wasn't asked to do much last year, in part because he didn't have the receiving core when they traded away guys, and his top receiver in a lot of ways was Ladd McConkey. Will that improve? Will getting Omarion Hampton change it with Najee Harris in the backfield? Or does that mean they're going to run even more? I mean, if he's throwing in 17-game season right around 20 touchdown passes, that's not elite. That's just not. That's J.J. McCarthy at Michigan. And that's in some ways how Jim Harbaugh wants to win. I just don't know. You can win that way. Can you win in the playoffs that way? And you only can if your defense is elite. And we saw when they played Houston last year, I think Justin Herbert threw 3 picks in that game after throwing 3 all season. So you have no margin for error when you try to play that way. The Broncos kind of tried to do that under Fangio. You know, you're winning 2017, 17-14, and it leaves you with no margin for error consistently. But I think Nix has a chance to be the second best quarterback in the division. And I believe it's going to be an argument, but I believe at the end of the season, you're going to have a case to say it's Mahomes. Nix and Herbert, there's an argument, but I think Nix had a slightly better year statistically, where he's responsible for, again, between 30 and 35 touchdowns. His completion percentage is, 67, 68%. And I believe they have a chance to win the division this year, the AFC West. I've said this on national radio shows. I think the Chargers or Broncos win the AFC West this year, ending the Chiefs' 9-year run. And the team that ends it, that quarterback likely will have had the better season. But quickly, and we'll move on to the final topic, is there a division in football that has a better 4 quarterbacks than the AFC West? That speaks to the challenge this year, folks. Understand that. In the frame of reference that I've talked about with friends and argued the AFC North. When you look at Joe Burrow, you look at Lamar Jackson, and I do not highly value Aaron Rodgers at this point, but statistically he was functional the second half of the season. He hasn't been great since like the first half of his last season in Green Bay. It's been a long time, folks, is what I'm getting at. 2.5 years since he's been an elite quarterback. But that division has an argument. Cleveland drags that division down because they don't have a quarterback right now. And if you say Joe Flacco, stop. He's keeping the seat warm for somebody. Problem is we don't know if Shedeur Sanders is going to be any good. We don't know if Dylan Gabriel will be any good. And Kenny Pickett has shown he's not very good. And Shedeur's hurt himself getting those 2 speeding tickets. It's just bad judgment. One's one thing. Totally get it. You can't get 2 speeding tickets within like a week, 2 weeks of each other. You got to have better judgment as a quarterback. You just have to. You have to be more responsible than that. And I hope he learns from that because I do think he should start by midseason there. But their quarterback position drags it down. You look at some of these other divisions, when you get to the division with the Colts, they have Daniel Jones. Come on. You look at the Jets, Justin Fields. Come on. Like, there's just always like one clear quarterback in a division that's dragging it down. And the AFC West doesn't have that. Again, it depends on how you view Geno Smith, but statistically, the last couple seasons, he's been really good. Certainly better 2 years ago than last year, but a functional NFL quarterback. So keep that in mind. But when you talk about the second best coach It's clearly to me the best coaches division. We have four coaches with a case for a Hall of Fame. Andy Reid is a Hall of Famer. Sean Payton's going to have a case regardless of how this Bronco thing turns out. He needs it, but he certainly still have a case. And then you've got Jim Harbaugh. If he ever even gets to the Super Bowl, might get in the Hall of Fame. But if he wins one, he's a Hall of Fame coach. And then you got Pete Carroll, who has won a Super Bowl and been to a Super Bowl. So AFC West loaded with quarterbacks and coaches. And that's what makes it so intriguing this year, that the Broncos could feel better and still, be floating around that 10-win mark. I think they'll be better than that, maybe by one, but it's not going to be easy. And that's where we get into this division race. When you look at the division, the Chiefs deserve the respect. But my point with the Chiefs is simple. They have offensive line questions, and they have three clear Hall of Famers. Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Chris Jones. Mahomes is still in his prime, and even while statistically has not been putting up huge numbers the last couple of years, there's no one you'd rather have on third down, fourth down, and red zone. It's amazing how efficient he is in those clutch situations. Bo Nix is also good in the clutch, folks, on goal-to-goal and in the red zone. His accuracy is around 68, 69%. He's not Mahomes' category. We're not saying that. Mahomes is in his prime. Andy Reid is a play caller, still sharp. But Travis Kelce, I thought he was going to retire after the Super Bowl. Not wanting him to go out that way. It felt like kind of Willie Mays playing for the Mets, falling down, just not looking right physically. And again, he's been dissolving before our eyes slowly these last couple of years. He's just so good in certain games, you kind of forget about it. But he's committed to himself to come back stronger. You see him at the tight end camp. You see that they have the shape he's in. He and Taylor Swift have a house in Florida. They say he's in the best shape of his career, all these things, diet, whatever. And credit to him, because he has nothing else to prove. He's a millionaire a million times over. And he's going to walk into a media gig that will pay him handsomely, that he doesn't want to go out the way he went out in the Super Bowl. But can he do it for 17 games? If you were going to tell me they were going to do the Gronk schedule with him and basically say, hey, we need you for about 10 games, I just don't know that the Chiefs can afford that. They don't have that kind of clearance like the Patriots did at points in that AFC East they were in that was so bad for so long. But can he do it for 17? And how will they pace him? But my point is, he's on the other side of his career. I feel like this is likely going to be his last season. Chris Jones is coming off the worst year of his career, and he's getting hurt more. He's an absolute game wrecker. His ability to move around anywhere on the front. He can play in, he can play inside. He absolutely terrorizes teams. He finds a matchup he likes after a first few series, and he exploits it, and he just makes life miserable. He turns the backfield into his own Airbnb. I've seen him do it to the Broncos, both with quarterback pressure in the run game, but he's 31, and he wasn't the same player last year. Does it mean he could do the triple Lindy into the fountain of youth? Of course, it could happen. He's great, but he's not the same player I've seen before. Neither is Kelce. They've lost some players defensively. Understandable. That's just how the erosion of great teams is in a salary cap league. And their offensive line has big questions. Are they a team capable of winning 12 games? Of course they are, because of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And they're getting healthy at receiver. That said, I think the Broncos are capable of winning 11, 12 games. If Talanoa Hufanga is healthy, if Dre Greenlaw is healthy, if Evan Ingram's healthy, J.K. Dobbins healthy. If three of those four are healthy, and for the Broncos to be great, it needed to be two of the offensive players, frankly. I've written this, that J.K. Dobbins could be the key to the Broncos winning the AFC West because it creates balance. It limits turnovers, puts you in situations where you're a better running team in the red zone. You control the clock. You control the other team's will. And then all of a sudden you have what many believe is the top defense in football playing with a lead. So they have all these components on paper that allow you to see the Broncos could win 11, 12 games. A quarterback that's ascending. A good play caller. They have a tight end who can win over the middle of the field finally. They have a running back who's been hurt more than he's been healthy, but has a nose for the end zone, 9 touchdowns last year, is really good against an 8-man box in short yardage situations, capable guy on third down. So even if Harvey has 6 touchdowns and develops into a third down back midseason with RJ Harvey taking over for Dobbins, if Dobbins becomes, the third down back, the Broncos should be in a much better position. Their running back game last year was terrible. And some rankings that are out right now have the Broncos as a top 5 offensive line, because Nick does a good job of limiting sacks. The scheme does limiting sacks. And if you look at the inside the metrics, Broncos were one of the worst teams in terms of winning in the run game with blocks, but not seeing the results from the actual running backs. So, do I think they could win the West? Absolutely, I do. If they need Dobbins, Ingram, and one of those 2 defensive players to be healthy. Not all 4. I'm not counting on all 4 being healthy. Their defense is going to be great regardless. It could be a top defense if Greenlaw and Talanoa Funga are both healthy, but they're going to be good regardless. The offense will not be better if Ingram and Dobbins don't play significant roles. And that is why you have to trust that their program can keep them on the field some, and their program can, and Sean Payton can utilize them in a way that makes Denver much more explosive and dynamic offensively, because that was missing last year. The dynamic part of the run game was missing. They had like the fewest runs of over 20 yards. You talk about Dobbins had 27 runs of 10 yards plus. He was in the top 10 in the league. That's the explosiveness that was missing last year with Javonte Williams, both as a pass catcher and runner. The tight ends had no explosiveness. They were ranked along with the Colts among the worst in the league in the pass game. So if Ingram's 50 catches for 700 yards and 5 touchdowns, and Dobbins gets you 800 yards and 6 touchdowns, that's a team that can win the AFC West. Playing the Chiefs in December in Kansas City stinks for the Broncos. Historically, they're like 3-18 in December in KC, something along those lines. So that means you're probably looking at a split with KC. You almost have to. It becomes a must-win game to beat them at home if you're going to win the division. You have to split with the Chargers, and you need to sweep the Raiders. And again, the Chargers are coming, man. They're nasty too. They're a physical team. They'll punch you in the mouth, and they play really well against the Broncos. They swept the Broncos last year. That can't happen. Broncos have to split with the Chiefs, split with the Chargers, and sweep the Raiders, and then you have a chance to look up at the end and win the AFC West. But it's exciting. I can create an argument that this can happen. Does it mean it will? No. But I feel confident in the argument I'm creating of why. When you look at the pieces, and we circle back to the first topic and we'll finish the show. Sean Payton, by independent outside metric, says he's the second best coach in the NFL. Not in his own, and he happens to be the second best coach then in his own division. But that's how you get back to being a Super Bowl contender. A top coach, a good culture, a defense that's absolutely filthy nasty, and a ascending offense with a quarterback who's on a rookie contract. These are the elements when you look at teams that have been winning in the current NFL, whether it was with Mahomes with Kansas City, you had the outlier year with Tom Brady. Mahomes in Kansas City, Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. Like, you get the right young quarterback, you build around him, then you have to figure it out once you pay him. It becomes more difficult, but that's how you get back. You gain your footing, and the Broncos are on the right track. Folks, I hope you stay with me. We'll have a couple more weeks here without training camp. Before you know it, we're going to have training camp, have players on all the time. I've got an interview with Malcolm Roach coming up in the next couple of weeks. He was absolutely fantastic. And we'll have at least one podcast devoted to Stadium Talk, as it looks more and more likely the Broncos, if you follow the breadcrumbs, want to be downtown at Burnham Yards. Nothing official, clearly, but we'll have more on that topic as well. And, of course, we'll have me rambling about whatever happens in sports for a few minutes. Again, Walker Montfort is going to take over as vice president of baseball operations. I'm sure that's going to go over well with the fans. But I will say this. It's an improvement over Greg Fiesel. Greg Fiesel is terrible. Absolutely waste of space. So Walker Montfort, while it's an internal hire and it's family, he could actually work if you get the right person above him. If he's going to be the baseball team president involved in baseball decisions, I don't like it. But go out and get a team president like Thad Levine, somebody of that ilk. Go out and hire a GM from the Rays, the Guardians, the Brewers, the Dodgers, the Giants, and let that person run all baseball ops, and Dick Montfort retire. So I hope you enjoyed my Rockies rant. Broncos are in a better position. These were the same rants we used to have about the Broncos when they didn't have an owner. They didn't have a GM. They didn't have a quarterback. At least we're done with that, right? Hope you're having a wonderful week. You have a great weekend. I'll be back mid next week. This pod is made possible by my great friends at Hoggatt Injury Law and Darby Hoggatt. And of course, Mile High Sports, Nate Lundy and Danny Bailey behind the screen. Broncos country, I do this pod for you. Happiness that begins with me. Go out there and have a great day.